everybody's friendship with Cameron. Think where man's glory most begins and ends, and say my glory was, I had such a friend.
On July the 14th at 10:15, 1970, Cameron was born. He took his time, 12 hours. It was meant to be dawn. Lumbar punches, convulsions, and cut eyebrows to boot. He could always find trouble, but cared not a hoot. Skateboarding was a passion. He scraped his knees raw. We'd get them all treated, and he'd go back for more. A consummate hoarder of most anything. Matchboxes, rubber bands, and bird nests he'd bring. Labels and marbles, they were all there to see. Fitting clothes in his drawers was so hard for me. He studied kung fu and got all the kit, trained as a black belt and got really fit. He moved up to Auckland to work for the Star. He thought it a great job as it gave him a car. The dairies took papers and gave him fireworks for free. The crackers were many, all the kids came to see. Car salesman was his next job, yards 1, 2 and 3. Then finance and insurance. It was a step up, you see. The girls that he dated were different for sure. We hoped that eventually he'd show them the door. The Adventist Book Centre was his best job by far. He enjoyed being manager, plus got a big car. The past 7 years have been a challenge he very bravely met, but the last few months were as hard as they could get. He found it frustrating and difficult, I know, but his very good buddies, they took him in tow. It's time to rest, Cameron. You fought a good fight. We love you and miss you. Night, night, sleep tight. Lance, Gildale and I want to thank you so much for the support you've given Cameron, especially over the last few years when he was totally dependent on you and your mates for transport. Also for the many hours you spent with me at A&E, usually on a Sunday on those hard plastic chairs. For the 11 days that Cam was in hospital, you were there every day. I know he appreciated it. I certainly did. Thank you, Lance. You're a real gem and you've been my rock.
Those are fantastic memories, Lance and Lindsay and Lorraine, and thank you for sharing that with us. And I think Cameron would have really enjoyed that, actually, and he would have wanted to add some more, I'm sure. It's now your turn to share some memories. Rosalind and Lindsay are going to come up first and share some special memories that they have of Cameron, but I'm sure that each one of us here have a special story. We won't have time for everyone, but we will have time for a few. So if you'd like to share a story, you're welcome to come forward into one of the front rows and to speak after Rosalind and Lindsay.
Alrighty, we'll see how we go. In my usual organised state, I left my actual proper copy at home. And you've got the working copy, but, you know, I think you'll get the gist. I first met Cameron and Lance together, actually. It was around about 95, and I remember they had suddenly emerged from somewhere. They were Lyndall and Fiona's friends. They were big and they were loud, and they were from Tauranga. They were part of a big extended group of friends that we hung out with. And if you'd have asked me what I thought of him at the time, I probably would have said that he was generous, not very good with money. He was loud, he was opinionated, and a little bit overbearing sometimes. I quite enjoyed him, you know, casually diluted in a group of friends, but I was like, whew, Cameron's a lot to handle. In 99, we went to the UK on our OE. And while we were there, Cameron did a whistle-stop tour, stopped in for about 36 hours for Fiona George's wedding, Didn't do a lot to change my opinion. Nothing had gone right for him in the first 12 hours. And so based on that, he wrote the entire UK off as good riddance for the rest of his life. 2001, we returned to New Zealand with the baby imminent, and life had moved on. Friends in 2.5 years were pretty much all still childless, doing, young things that you do when you have disposable income and you're free to go out and about. And parenthood for us was a big shock. And that's when we actually got to know Cameron a lot better, because Cameron was the one that would ring up every Saturday night and he'd say, "What are you doing?" We'd say nothing, and he'd say, "Okay, well, we'll come up." And they'd come up, they'd have dinner, we'd watch TV, we'd play games, and it just became a regular thing on a Sunday afternoon. The first year back, we bought a house, and the boys every Sunday came up, and they sat and stained my house all summer long. There were only special bits I'd give Cameron, because he wasn't quite as careful as I wanted, but, it was the thought that counted. When Max was about 1, I went back to work for 1 shift a week in an evening. And from there on, in the boys' small group, as I like to call it, which mostly consisted of poker and games and not so much Bible study, was born. I'm not sure if they thought that they were helping Lindsay or if they were sorry for him doing solo parent duty, but every night I'd be off at work and I knew the boys were coming over, they'd have dinner together, and as soon as the kids were in bed, they would be playing games and things. Over the years, the group became very tight. There was lots of shared wins and losses, and almost wins and times that, dastardly strategies were employed by everyone to completely ruin someone else's game, and a fierce sense of loyalty. At times, these boys would plan evenings out or Sundays at golf or whole weekends away, which, particularly when the kids were little, I was not always delighted about, because it was pretty hardcore being on solo duty myself. But that was all good. When Cameron was diagnosed with his brain tumour, it was a huge shock to us all. No one was prepared for it, and none of us really knew how to handle it. But Cameron, bless his loud and sensitive soul, made it easier for us. He was really open about his situation. He never complained about it. And he just got on with the business of living his life the way that he enjoyed. This seemed to involve a lot of takeaways, vast amounts of Coke Zero, lots and lots of movies, buying DVDs and things. And we all teased him about it, but he didn't mind. And from now on in, they had a watertight excuse for their boys' nights out or their golf days or the weekends away, because I would get, "But he's got a brain tumour, Rosalind." And they even coined a phrase for it, which is called playing the tumour card. And so over the last however many years, that has been played a lot. And it's probably during these times that I really got to appreciate a different Cameron than what I had taken notice of superficially initially. And sure, he did have the exterior where he was still loud and he was still opinionated and frequently politically incorrect, but he was also a fun-loving and loyal friend. He was a lovely uncle to Megan and Ben. He kept them oversupplied with any surplus Happy Meal toys that he had, watched them grow and develop, and he was really interested and involved in their lives. He loved a good laugh. He was a great stirrer, and he was never happier, even towards the end when he wasn't necessarily quite so good at being involved in a conversation. He'd just throw out some sort of something that would get everyone worked up and then sit back in his chair and watch it all happen. Cameron would have to be the least demanding guest that you could ever have at your house. He never minded what the house was like, tidiness-wise. He'd usually bring his own dinner, plus extra snacks, and was faultless and flattery in any meals or baking that were provided. If you ask me now, I would probably say, describing Cameron, that he was generous. Well, I have to mention, actually, that he was charming, because every so often, out of the blue, for no reason, he'd turn up with flowers for me as well. A little bit obsessive. Vast collection of the movies and DVDs. I think that when it came down to it, though, we hassled Cameron about the amount of money that he spent on the takeaways and the movies and all of those sorts of things. But Cameron didn't care about material things. He just loved people. That's where his value lay. And he didn't need all the bells and all the whistles in his life. As long as he could sustain a few of his obsessions and he was around the people that he loved and enjoyed, he was content. Cameron coped with his tumour and declining abilities with grace and dignity and a lot more patience than I ever would have anticipated. I will greatly miss him around my table and in our family's lives. He will be thought of often, and he'll be remembered with love as a kind and patient friend who got a bum deal and played his cards with integrity.
Roz has talked about what Cameron means to our family. I'd like to touch on what he also meant to me as a friend. Fair warning, just in about 2 minutes, I'm likely to be blubbing like a baby, but that's okay, because I'm sure Cameron would tell us all to harden up. And at some time in the future up there, I know he'll look back at today and be smugly proud that he made his mates cry, and seriously peeved that he didn't squeeze a single tear out of Lance yet. I, for one, don't want to disappoint him, so. I've known Cameron for the last 20-odd years, and we've always been friends, but particularly in the last 10 or so years. As any parent will know, your social life changes as your family grows. And in Cameron and in Lance, I've been lucky, blessed in fact, to have mates more than willing to arrange our friendship around the needs of my family. And that's no small thing. It involved getting up at 6 a.m. on summer Sunday mornings, when any self-respecting 30-year-old single male would hopefully just be going to bed. Every week they did it to play golf at the Papakura Army Camp course, and because that was the only time I could realistically regularly play. I remember Cameron once there drove the green on a par 4. It was pretty impressive. He regularly reminded us of that. The fact that his shot had taken a lucky bounce off a tree over a creek through a bunker to get to the green didn't really matter. Unfortunately, the manner in which that shot arrived on the green was much more indicative of Cameron's overall golf game than the final result. His golf game pretty much sucked. I think Lance let him win once, because that's what good friends do. But he was bad, and that was pretty much confirmed in recent years when the tumour resulted in a lack of balance when he swung the golf club and double vision when he looked down at the tee. And to be honest, there was no resulting difference in Cameron's scorecard. Cameron, among others, also spent a month of Sundays helping to strip back and restain our first house, and I distinctly remember him sitting high up on the scaffolding 2 stories under the eaves of our house, happily breathing in the fumes from the mould treatment he was occasionally brushing on. Our games night started some 9 years ago when Megan turned 1 and Roz went back to work one evening a week. Since then it's been pretty regular, and it's moved from Tuesday night to Wednesday night, now to Thursday night, all based around when Roz was working so that I would be able to play, and I appreciate that. For a long time, while Cameron still had access to a company car and free petrol, this was also doubled up on Sunday night. Over time, the point of playing games to me became so much more about the arguments, insults and friendship than the actual games. Who won the games meant nothing really in relation to who lost, how badly they lost, and better still, who was responsible for making them lose. With 3 accountants usually present, the conversations were often financial in nature. I'm strangely proud to say that we once argued for a full month over the merits of monthly versus fortnightly mortgage repayments, in which, in the true spirit of games night, I'd like to remind Andrew that he is still wrong and Lance and I are still right. Cameron found this particular conversation beneath him. He sat by drinking 2 litres of Coke Zero and eating his BK chicken with pineapple, extra mayo, and not a vegetable in sight. I know Cameron appreciated games nights, as I would regularly get a call between 2 and 3 on Wednesday afternoons to check that it was okay to come on over. It was when those calls stopped and I had to call to check they were coming over, and found out he'd forgotten what day it was, that I realised that things are starting to turn for him. I know I speak for all games night participants over the years to say Cameron will be hugely sorely missed. Loyalty, fun-loving, determined, humour and free DVD rentals. That's how I remember Cameron as my friend.